The ending of 2022 was as good as it gets for the Sacramento Kings. The start of 2023, not so much. The Kings fall to the Grizzlies in Memphis 118-108. We're not going to spend too much time talking about this game because it's time to discuss adjusting and raising our expectations for this Kings team now that we're in the new year. It's all right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season long. Today, presented by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports producer and reporter for ABC 10 News here in Sacramento, where I sat in my office and unfortunately had to take off the New Year's 2023 party hat and no noisemakers to be heard in the office during this Kings game. It was just a rough watch, really, start to finish for the Sacramento Kings. Not that it was a massive blowout, not that it was the worst basketball we've seen the Kings play this season, but not a lot to get excited about. First and foremost, Happy New Year to you. Hope your 2022 ended well, and your 2023 has started even better. Hopefully it started better than the Sacramento Kings 2023 has started, but I appreciate you spending the new year here with me on Locked On Kings. But this Kings game, we're not going to spend too much time on. In fact, this is going to be a pretty short first segment compared to how most of my first segments are, because there's just not a lot from this game to really talk about and focus on. Certainly more negatives than positives. There are a couple positive things that I do want to highlight and talk about in this game. But really, it could have been and really should have been a lot worse than the 118-108 final score. Like, looking at some of the numbers, watching this game, some of the runs the Grizzlies were going on, the amount the Sacramento Kings were struggling offensively, like the Kings, in theory, and if you're looking on paper, should have been blown out in this game. And they're fortunate that they weren't. Now, they also give them a lot of credit for not being blown out in this game, and we'll get to that. But the Kings shot 40% from the field as a team, which is terrible. They shot 34% from three-point range as a team. They did have 15 made threes, but to make 15 threes and still shoot 34%, that just goes to tell you how many threes the Sacramento Kings actually missed in this game. And last time they played Memphis, in Memphis, was, I think, the 7th game of the 7-game win streak. I didn't watch that game as it was happening. I was in Disneyland at the time with my family, but going back and watching that game and comparing the two, like the three ball was where the Sacramento Kings had a lot of success in that win. So it didn't surprise me that they were trying to reciprocate that. And typically, if the Kings are scoring 13, 14, 15 threes in a game, they're actually in really good shape to win that game. And this just wasn't the case at this point. The Kings were only down by 1 point at halftime. And it should have been way more than that because they were shooting 36% from the field and 25% from three-point range. The Sacramento Kings are a team that relies heavily on their offense. Their offense is one of the best in the league. If that offense is not there, the Sacramento Kings are in big trouble, and that's just the reality of the state of this team at this point in time. They're ahead of schedule in a lot of ways. They're doing better than we expected to at this point. And again, we're going to focus a lot on expectations here in this podcast today. But it's very clear that this team is offensively driven, they're offensively carried, and that means that they're not too hard to figure out in the sense that you slow down their offense a little bit, you have a really good chance to win. Well, that's what the Memphis Grizzlies were able to do, plus the Sacramento Kings were just having one of those rough team shooting nights where nobody was really hitting shots consistently enough. The Kings allowed 21 offensive rebounds in this game. Now, surprisingly, they only gave up, I think, 4 or 6 more second chance points than they scored. So again, they should have lost this game by more. They should have given up more second chance points than they did, giving up 21 offensive boards. But where that really killed the Kings is giving Memphis second, third, fourth opportunities to stretch out possessions and not allow the Sacramento Kings to get out in transition, which we know is where they're so dangerous and so effective. 13 of their 21 offensive rebounds were from Steven Adams alone. It's pretty incredible when you see someone have a stat line where they have more offensive rebounds than defensive rebounds, especially for someone as dominant on the boards as Steven Adams is. He had a career-high 23 rebounds in this game. I think his former career high was also against the Sacramento Kings. He just abuses the Kings on the glass. Also had 11 points for a double-double. And I tweeted this out. If you have a size problem, and the Sacramento Kings 100% have a size problem, Steven Adams is going to abuse you. Even more than Nikola Jokic. Like, Nikola Jokic is a big guy, right? And we know he can rebound. We know he can score. We know he can pass. And I'm not saying that Steven Adams is better than the reigning defending MVP in Nikola Jokic. What I'm saying is Steven Adams and Nikola Jokic, although physically very built, Steven Adams typically dominates and takes advantage of size mismatches more than Jokic does. Jokic is so skilled that he can get you from anywhere. He doesn't have to feast around the rim or in the paint to be at his most effective. He's got a great jumper. He's so dangerous in the high post and in the mid-range because of his passing ability. You don't know what he's going to do. He can put the ball on the floor. Like, Nikola Jokic is the full package. Steven Adams is just a brick wall on the inside. And if you do not have the size to contest rebounds with Steven Adams and to box Steven Adams out effectively, you are going to get abused. And the Sacramento Kings simply do not have their size. Like, Domantas Sabonis, it's pretty crazy to think about. Arguably the best player on the Sacramento Kings is a center. And yet, the center is the weakest position on the Kings. They have very little depth at that position. This is something we've talked about a lot over recent weeks, right? Is it going to be Rashawn Holmes? Well, he scored like 2 points in a handful of minutes. He was the guy. Is it going to be Chimezie Metu? Is it going to be Neemias Queta? Who's it going to be? Alex Len? The Kings are very undersized and are struggling at the position, which is interesting because I saw someone point out on Twitter, and they're absolutely right. Like, coming into the season, we thought the wing depth was going to be the biggest problem for the Kings. And the wing depth is still definitely can be improved. The Kings' big depth is really killing them. It's not as bad as tonight made it look because that's just what Steven Adams does. But in games like this where there is a glass cleaner like Steven, and when Domantas Sabonis is out of the game, the Kings just get absolutely abused. Plus, the Memphis Grizzlies were putting Steven Adams in the game every time Domantas Sabonis was in the game because Adams is also a disruptor and did a pretty good job of not allowing Sabonis to have the success in the pick and roll that he had, for example, the other night against the Utah Jazz when he shot a perfect 12 of 12 from the field. The Kings also allowed 24 points off of 16 turnovers. Again, to only lose by 10 points, to give up 21 offensive boards, to shoot 40% from the field as a team, 34% from three-point range, to give up 24 points off of 16 turnovers, and to only lose by 10 points. I'm not saying this is a silver lining. I'm saying the Kings should have lost more. It should have been worse. It should have been a lot worse for the Sacramento Kings. Plus, the foul discrepancy. The Sacramento Kings were actually a perfect 15 of 15 from the foul line, and the Memphis Grizzlies struggled from the foul line, shooting about 64%, I think. But they got to the foul line, especially John Morant, got to the foul line way more than the Sacramento Kings did. But I do have to give the Kings some credit. I do have to give the Kings some credit. And again, I told many of you, if you've been listening all season long, and I told myself I wasn't going to make this a silver lining podcast this year. This isn't a silver lining podcast. The Kings have the expectations to win. We expect this team to compete every single night. They were competitive in this game, so I got to give them credit for that. But like, the Kings are not a bad team that care about moral victories anymore. So I can point out the positives from this game without saying that it's a silver lining. And the positives in this game were the fact that the Kings were struggling as much as they were offensively through pretty much the entirety of this game, and they were still in it. Like, that suggests to me that defensively this team is improving enough to where when their elite skill is not there, when their team scoring is not there, when they're not able to get out in transition and run up a score that way, they can still put themselves in a position where they can be in the game and have a chance to win the game. Now, the Grizzlies pulled away in the fourth quarter to end up winning this game by double digits, but Sacramento kept it close for the majority. And I give Sacramento a lot of credit, too, because there were a lot of Memphis 8-0, 9-0, 10-0 runs in this game, or 10-2 runs in this game that Sacramento would follow up with a 7-0 or 8-0 or 9-2 run of their own to keep it close. So Sacramento always seemed to have a counterpunch. They always seemed to have an answer for what the Memphis Grizzlies were doing. It almost felt like a role reversal from Friday night's game against the Utah Jazz, where the Kings were the better team, and the Jazz just kept hanging around and keeping it close and gave themselves an opportunity to try and steal that game, and they almost did. Well, the Memphis Grizzlies were the better team tonight, but the Kings just kept hanging around and keeping it close, took small leads, had a chance to steal it. Ultimately, Memphis pulled away and put this game to bed in the fourth quarter. So I give the Sacramento Kings credit for that. That's worth pointing out, because in the past, the Kings shoot this poorly, they're dead in the water. They're getting blown out. And they didn't get blown out in this game. Not a moral victory, not a silver lining, but something important to point out, and something that reminds us or shows us that this team is improving defensively and figuring out how to be less reliant upon their offensive ability or their shooting or scoring or just one aspect of their game. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the number one way to play daily fantasy sports. Now, here's how Prize Picks works. You pick 2 to 6 players, and you decide or guess if they are going to score more or less than their Prize Pick scoring projection. And you can win up to 25 times your money. So, for example, if you picked De'Aaron Fox to score more than 20.5 points tonight, you would have lost. If you picked less, you would have won. Now, you partner that with a couple other players. Maybe you pick John Morant to score more than 28.5 points tonight. You would have won there. That's how it works, and you make money off of that basketball knowledge. So it's really about looking at matchups and thinking, okay, which players do I think are going to have a good night? And then looking at the Prize Picks projections and trying to find out which ones are the best, which players are the best to take on that given night. There's no competing up against other people, no worrying about sharks that are out there that make a living off of beating you in these kind of fantasy battles. It's just you versus the projections available. And they have it for more than just NBA basketball. They have it for the NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, soccer, MMA, boxing, disc golf. The list goes on and on. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals. So when you win your money, you will get your money, and they're currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com and sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users will get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 if you use our promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up. You enter promo code LOCKEDON, you deposit $100, you get another $100 right there, no questions asked. You can then use that $200 to help you make even more money by playing Prize Picks the way daily fantasy sports were meant to be played. Let's talk about expectations for the Sacramento Kings, because I think it's fair to say they've changed or they've increased. Now, it doesn't have to be a massive increase. It can be a slight increase, and this is going to be an open conversation because I want to hear from you. I want to know what your expectations are now for the Kings now that we are in 2023. Like, a lot of people think it's not until December and the change of the calendar year when the season really starts. And the Sacramento Kings still do have a ton to prove. However, like I've said in the past, this 19-16 record that the Kings currently have, it's not a fluke. Sacramento is currently in the 6th seed, which is the final playoff spot to avoid the play-in at this point in time. They're half a game back of the 5th seed, which I think is held by the LA Clippers, so they're half a game back of the number 1 spot in the Pacific Division. If you care about divisions in the NBA, they're useless. And they are a full game back of the 4th seed, which I think is held by the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, there's so much parity right now in the league. These positions are so close. The Kings, after their win against the Utah Jazz on Friday night, actually did have the 4th seed, drop down to the 6th with their loss, and a couple other, and the Clippers win, I think, and the Dallas Mavericks win. So just goes to show there's a lot of movement that can happen on any given night. There's also, it's easy to see, or there's not a lot of wiggle room between the 6th seed and the 7th seed and the 8th seed, so the Kings could drop if they go on a slide at the right time, or rather wrong time. So let's talk about expectations then. And in order to talk about this appropriately and clearly, I think I need to go back and talk about what my initial expectations were that we discussed on this podcast heading into this season. My initial expectations were this: that the 6th seed for the Kings was the best case scenario. Like, I thought if the season went about as perfectly as it could for the Sacramento Kings, the 6th seed would be where they ended up. I did not predict the Western Conference to be as close as it is currently right now, and I still think we're going to get some separation, and some teams are going to drop out, and some teams are going to solidify themselves between now and, let's say, March time when we really start paying attention to playoff seeding. Also, my expectation for this Kings team was that they were a play-in team, and the hope was that they would be a 7th or 8th seed, meaning they would secure themselves at least one home play-in game. If they're a 7th seed, for example, they would guarantee themselves at least 1-2 if they lose, right? The 7th and 8th seed play. If the Kings were the 7th seed and hosted the 8th seed and lost, they would then host the winner of the 9th and 10th seed, for example. So 7th or 8th seed, I thought, was the goal for Sacramento. And the expectation was that this team was going to be a play-in team. Remember how much I talked about like the Kings' bare minimum being the 9th or 10th best team in the Western Conference. Didn't seem like that big of an ask. And it's still not a big ask at all for the Sacramento Kings, right? So now my new expectations. To me, hosting a play-in game is a must at this point. Like anything less would be disappointing. If the Sacramento Kings are a 9th or 10th seed, even if that means they get into the play-in and still have a chance to make the playoffs, that's a disappointment for this team at this point in time. The Kings, I believe, should, at the very least, host a play-in game. 7th or 8th seed is more than achievable for this Kings team. I think 6th seed or higher is very possible for this group. It went from best case scenario to there's a good possibility they could pull it off without being the best version of themselves. 6th seed probably a little more likely than 5th in this conversation. However, the best case scenario to me has now changed to the 3rd or 4th seed. Now, 3rd seed is like real best case scenario, and a lot of things have to go right for the Sacramento Kings to pull that off. But being a 3rd or a 4th seed guarantees you in the opening round at least home court advantage, which means in a best-of-7 series, the Kings, let's say they're the 4th seed and they play the 5th seed Mavericks. That means that if the game went to 7, if the series went to 7 games, 4 of the 7 would be in Sacramento. For a team to go from a playoff drought and not even being in the play-in to securing home court advantage would be really significant. So how do the Kings meet these expectations? How do they get there? Let's talk about each one. Let's talk about them just being a home play-in team. To me, if the Kings, to be a home play-in team, number one thing they need to do is just stay healthy. If the Sacramento Kings can stay healthy and keep playing at the level that they're playing or with the base expectations that we have based off of how this team has performed to this point, they are hosting a play-in game. Like I think this Sacramento Kings team is good enough to where I can say that with confidence. Now, again, you could fall pretty quickly when you go on a slide at the wrong time. That's why taking care of business, especially at home, is so important. We will get to that. To be a 6th or 5th seed, which again I said is possible, maybe not probable at this point yet, but very possible for this group. It's not, some would call it overachieving. I think it would, if it's an overachievement, it's a slight overachievement. The Kings have to definitely protect home floor if they're going to pull that off. I'm talking about them being 6-7 games above 500 on their home floor, giving them enough wiggle room to drop some games here or there on the road. And there has to be minor defensive improvement for the Kings. I'm talking about going from bottom of the league defensively to, if they're in the 20s, it's the high 20s, like 20, 21, 22. That's the kind of thing that's, I think, required for the Kings to secure a 6th or 5th seed. Now, the best case scenario, the 4th or 3rd seed for the Sacramento Kings, they have to be middle of the pack defensively, meaning a 15th, 16th, 14th best defensive team, which is a major jump to make, but not, again, out of the realm of possibility for the Sacramento Kings. They have to continuously improve over the course of this, the remainder of this season. They have to maintain a league best or close to league best offense, which might be more difficult than it sounds for this group. They have to have 2 All-Stars, and I mean De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis continuing to play at an all-star level through the remainder of the season, even after All-Star break. And it's not just, De'Aaron Fox is an all-star by technicality or anything like this. No, it's all-star numbers De'Aaron Fox will have to average and put up for the remainder of the season. And then safety net. And this is something that I think is extremely important for the success of the Kings, period, for the remainder of this season. And it kind of ties into protecting your home floor. The Sacramento Kings need to win almost all of the games, if not all of the games, that they're supposed to win. Especially like these upcoming home games. I think January is a crucial month for the Sacramento Kings. Crucial for their likelihood of making it into a high playoff seed. If they fail in this month to take advantage of some of the matchups that they have at home, the San Antonio Spurs, the Orlando Magic, the Houston Rockets twice, if they fail to take advantage of that stretch, go 4-0 during that stretch, I don't think that's unfair or unrealistic to say, then they're really going to have trouble when teams start really picking it up in February, in March, and in April. Because that's where it really gets gritty. That's where it really gets tough. And there are going to be some games during that stretch that the Sacramento Kings drop simply because they're taking on a team that's a little more desperate or has the experience and is gearing up for a potential deep playoff run. A safety net is crucial for the Sacramento Kings to secure home court advantage in the playoffs. Crucial. I'm talking about a near perfect January, a really, really good month of January. Obviously, it hasn't gone off to the best start with their loss in Memphis. Some would say the loss in Memphis is expected. Memphis is an established playoff team. The Sacramento Kings are not, and they're on the road. But like this next game coming up in Utah, handling your business in that game. Again, splitting the road trip and then coming home and protecting your home floor, giving yourself 7, 8, 9 games between, or 9 games above 500. I don't expect the Kings to necessarily finish the season 9 games above 500, but giving yourself that so that when those losses do start to pile up, when they happen, when that cold stretch happens, because it will happen at some point for this Kings team, they can survive it. They can fight their way through it and work their way through it without having to worry about plummeting from a 4th or 5th seed to a 7th, 8th, or 9th seed with one bad losing streak. It's a new year. That means our friends at Built Bar are back. And if you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want to deal with all the fat and all the calories, you have to try a Built Bar if you haven't already. Now that we are through the holidays, I know my goal personally is to eat a little healthier this year. And if you're like me and you want to eat healthier, but you don't want to give up those sweets that you enjoy so much. I have a sweet tooth. I'm a candy guy. I'm a dessert guy. Allow Built Bars to make it easier for you. They don't expect you to give up your sweet tooth. They just help give you something that satisfies those cravings while also giving you something that is healthy for you. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And in addition to that, they have so many amazing flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I don't know how Built Bar does it, but these essentially candy bars only have 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar while being packed with a whopping 17 grams of protein. You don't need to wait around to try these right now, whether you want a Built Bar with all their amazing flavors, the granola bars, the marshmallow puffs, they have them all for you right now. You can get them on Built.com, and now you can even get them at your local Walmart or at Sam's Club. Head to your nearest Walmart today, go to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars right now. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream or double chocolate or coconut puffs. They're affordable and delicious. If you're close to Sam's Club, make sure to run in there and grab a 13-bar box of their hit flavors like brownie batter and churro as well. Trust me, you can thank me later. Built.com. So what are your expectations now for the Sacramento Kings? Have they raised a lot? Have they raised a little bit? Are they the same? I know they haven't lowered unless you really had ridiculously high expectations for the Kings. Let me know. Let's talk about that because I think this is an interesting conversation, and I think it's okay for expectations to shift now that we have context of what this Sacramento Kings team actually is. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but it's fair to look at this team, recognize that it's gone from a good start to now, okay, this is kind of who this team is. How much further can they go? Or is it sustainable? Like, these are things that we're going to be continuing to talk about as we get through January, as we get through February. And like I said, this month of January is essential. I think the Kings can decide their playoff opportunity right now during this month of January, starting off 2023 by handling their business the right way. Let me know if you feel the same way at Matt George Sack on Twitter. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Again, Happy New Year, happy 2023 to you. I hope you have a great year, and I hope this is finally the year, of course, the Sacramento Kings end their playoff drought. I do think the Kings are going to be able to do it. I reached out to ask some of you to send me your favorite Kings moments from 2022. So many of you have done that. If you still want to do that, please send them to me as well and engage me in conversation there. Would love to chat with you about that. Kings are off tomorrow. I'm going to be taking it off as well, as I'm going to be handling a lot of moving. I'm almost in my new house completely, getting my office set up back up, so I'll be back in my office. And for you Lord of the Rings nerds out there, yes, I'll have my Lord of the Rings set up back behind me, so I'm looking forward to getting back into that comfort zone a little bit. So that's coming very soon here. And on January 3rd, Kings, Utah Jazz, a rematch, a game that the Jazz would certainly like to have back. But even though it's on the road, it's a game that I expect the Sacramento Kings to have a really good chance of winning. Handling their business is the name of the game for the Kings for the remainder of this season, but especially this month, and we'll see if they can do it. Really appreciate your support. Hope you have a wonderful 2023. I hope the end of your 2022 was fantastic, and thank you again for choosing to spend your new year right here with me on Locked On Kings. 2022 was an incredible year. We blew our record listenership and numbers completely out of the water. 1.3 million plus views and downloads of the podcast, which is just absolutely incredible. And for someone like me who's just thankful to be able to do what I do and cover the team that I love and interact with Kings fans, having 1.3 million downloads and listens and views on the podcast is just insane. And I look forward to topping that here in 2023. Thank you so much for your support again. Can't wait to talk to you on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.